Ask Mixing with Mike. Let's start with the first question, and it is, what are the best speakers for mixing? I get this question a lot, and there's no real right answer for that. Some people really focus on the frequency response of speakers, like that you have flat frequency response across the spectrum. But the problem is that nobody really has flat hearing. Um, so it's kind of like a relative thing. You kind of like say, all right, well, relative to the way that I hear, is it better for me to tune the speakers so that when I listen to them, they sound flat, more or less? Or is it better for me to have flat speakers and just understand what my frequency response deficiencies are and just work from there? And there's no real right perfect answer for that, because I think what happens is most of the time when people go about the real efforts of trying to make their speakers sound perfectly flat or even at every frequency, they almost always sound really awful. Um, and so, what I think is most important is the imaging quality or the accuracy of the speakers. So it's not so much that every frequency is represented, but it's the quality of how it's represented, right? So Dre, it sounds like you have 1031s. I love 1031s, and so 1031s um, uh, are really really cool. They have a dip in the mid range, in the low mid range, and so you need to really understand how they work, because it's easy to end up with mixes that have too much of that in them, right? Too much low mid. Um, and that can be a problem, but you have to understand what they're like, and you have to listen to loads and loads and loads of music on them. So when people go to a store, what I usually tell people to do is go to a store, go to a music store that has a selection of speakers. So some of the stores, especially if you're in a major city, they'll have like a pro audio store where they'll have a speaker room, and listen to them all, right? And notice which ones kind of jump out at you. Make sure it's not a level difference, a gain difference, because quite often you can be fooled by, oh yeah, they're not just, it's not that they sound better, they sound louder. So you want to really compensate and make sure the gain is even, right? So for me, I'm a Genelec guy. I'm a Genelec guy. So but the older Genelecs, not the newer ones. Like, I'm not a big fan of the 80 series Genelecs. They add in all kinds of crazy circuitry. They just don't sound right to me. And I'm also a big fan of the Adams speakers, which is not the way that yeah, so not the 80 series. Yeah, they have like the 80 32s and all that, and I'm more of like a 1031. Um, and I have a pair of 1029s that I love. Those are my favorite speakers that I run with a Genelec sub that's set with them, and I love that because I can really balance out those speakers, and they're just ridiculously accurate. They're just in way I got used to them. I like them a lot better than the 1031s. But the Adams speakers I really like as well. Some people are really into the focals. They just don't sound right to me, and those are probably the monitors that people like the most, and they do image well. They don't really fit my hearing as well. And the Adams are a bit more middly. They have a little bit more of a woody kind of tone, but I understand the depth and the character of them a little bit better. It just seems to suit my hearing a bit more. So I really, really like them, and I really love the accuracy of that. They use a tweeter element that's a ribbon tweeter that's very different, and reacts, I think, much faster and more accurately in terms of the projection of high frequencies. But those are kind of cool. There's so many speakers that are out there and good, and the best thing to do is to bring in music that you really love, that you really really know well, and listen in the store. And you have to be careful, because you don't want to get fooled too much by the acoustics of the space. That usually they're on shelves and stuff like that, so you're gonna kind of want to pull them as close to the edge of the shelf so they're almost over it, right? So you're not getting a resonant buildup of from the shelving, and listen to them, and really listen to them, and listen for the imaging quality. Like, can you see the audio coming from the speaker? And you may be surprised, because different types of music, different types of speakers will kind of come out, maybe ones that you didn't think. And you don't really have to spend a ton of money, for some decent monitors that make a really, really big difference, right? So, there are many companies like Dyn Audio and Mackie that kind of create another layer or another level of speakers that are actually very, very, very good. Where you're not spending $2, 3, $4,000 a speaker or a pair of speakers. And the quality of monitoring has never been better from that perspective. There's also an interesting one that's shaped like an egg. Um, that is, I want to say it's SE that makes them, that I've never heard, and they look really cool. And there's something about that's really cool. I met this one guy who actually developed a speaker that was in a coconut shell, and it really sounded amazing because the sound actually diffracts around the speaker. And so you'll notice that a lot of the shapes of speakers, they don't have these flat fronts anymore. They're sort of rounded on the front. And what speaker designers started to realize is that um, they're very different sounding. Yeah, so those little Apple speakers, right? Well, people listen to crappy the earbuds or whatever from Apple, right? That's a whole different thing. But the you'll notice that a lot of the speakers, they have rounded sort of fronts because when the sound diffracts, if it's edgy, then it sort of reflects back in and starts to create these weird colorations at different frequencies. It's an interesting idea. It takes a little bit of getting used to. All right, so there's our Ask Mixing with Mike for today on speakers for mixing.